Yo, what's going on? It's your man Rick the Dawn, and I just saw Warfare. I don't know where to start with this one, man. Okay, so I went to see this movie. I got a couple recommendations, and I said I'll go check it out. I'm not really doing anything, and man, I was the only one in the movie theater. And I got a sense why, because this movie is not like, it doesn't feature a Marvel character. It doesn't have vampires and all these attention grabbing things. So I would imagine this is why. But I go into the movie theater and I'm watching it. I'm kind of tired because I just ate a ton of food before going into the movie theater. And the movie is kind of slow paced. And I know why. It's because this movie strived to capture a very realistic experience. A lot of movies have tropes, like when someone opens the refrigerator and they close it and there's a jump scare, or when they have all these things that make the movie predictable. Like a person goes down the stairs and when he turns around, he hears a creak in the corner, and he looks, he doesn't see anything. Then he walks up the stairs, he hears another crink in the corner. He looks back a second time, and then he doesn't care, and he turns around, and there's the guy or the monster in front of him as he goes up. It's just like the same old thing over and over again. And this movie was the exact opposite of that. There were times in this movie that I was expecting for some kind of trope to happen. Like, okay, this is the moment where a big bang happens. Like a guy would be standing in front of a window, and you're thinking to yourself, wow, he's in front of the window. A bullet's going to come in right about, and it doesn't happen. Or there will be someone looking outside of the door, and you're like, oh, he's going to get shot in the face in 3, 2, and nothing happens. It's a very realistic movie, and I can appreciate that. So, in the first maybe 15 minutes of the movie, I nodded off because it's just a lot of talking, guys kind of sitting around playing with a yo-yo, just like very mundane activities. But you can imagine that if you're in that situation, you're in that war situation, there's going to be downtime where you're just kind of shooting the S word, as some people say. But boy, once it gets cranked up to 1,000, and I couldn't go back to sleep. In fact, I think that it's appropriate that at this particular moment, I stop and say this to every single person in the military that has served, that is currently serving, even anybody that is a family member of someone who served. I really want to just take a moment to say I appreciate your not bravery, because this is not about the USA. This is not about propaganda. This is about human life. And I just want to say thank you for just being a hero, man, or an actual real life hero. No cape, no wings, just bravery. Because what I saw on the screen tonight takes uncertain bravery, and it makes me that much more angry when I see these little thugs, walk around and doing these videos with guns all over the place, like they some kind of killers and all that, or these renegade cops who are bullying civilians and shooting It drives me crazy when I see those two categories of people and contrast them, these fake gangsters, with these real heroes that's really out here putting it all on the line, risking life and limb, literally. And it's just like, I want to take a moment to say I appreciate you for your bravery. All right, I appreciate you for your bravery. And a lot about how I felt tonight was just wondering why. Like, why is war necessary? Why is this something that has to be done? I wanted to ask out loud, why are these men, these American men, in Afghanistan? Why? I'm trying to find the reason, because I couldn't find a valid reason as to why they were there and why they were risking their lives. For what? I was wondering that, like, why are they there and what are they risking their very lives for? I'll never understand. And I don't want to be offensive, because I know there's an actual reason. I know there's a why. Trust me, I know. But I couldn't imagine my son being there. I'll put it that way. I wouldn't be able to sleep ever. I would never be able to sleep knowing that my child was in that situation. I wouldn't be able to sleep. It would drive me crazy. Now, back to the movie. There's a point in the film where the guys are trying to get out of this building because the building is compromised, and you think that they're going to get out. There's a tank that rolls up right in front of the house and lets down the back latch. And you're thinking to yourself, they're going to get out of the situation, because that's a trope. That's what happens in these kind of movies. The hero makes it out, and you're just thinking that's what's going to happen. They did an amazing job with how each actor performed those very small and nuanced actions, like trailing someone, tapping people on the shoulder. It felt extremely authentic, as if there were people just outside the camera's focus that actually served. And if I'm not mistaken, that is true, but it felt like they were right there directing people in real time versus giving them some kind of script or information outside of action time. It felt like they were right there on the set directing people, because they hit every action so accurately. But this tank is outside, and they're doing everything they're supposed to do in terms of making sure their 6 and their 12s are covered. And they get a couple people inside of the tank, and then 3 more go to enter the tank, and a IED explodes, blows the tank up. And what happens after that is absolute chaos. Okay, because when the smoke clears, you have at least 2 people who are severely wounded. That is not including the other soldiers who either died or retreated back into the building. But the 2 people who had severe wounds, it was one of the most difficult things to watch. When I say that their legs were like string, and by string I mean they, like, for example, they were bringing or pulling one of the soldiers back into the building, and his leg got caught on a pillar. There's a pillar here. Here's his leg, and as they're pulling him, it got latched onto it because it was like no bone in the leg. It was just skin. And I said to myself, this is inhumane. That's what I said to myself. I said, this is a terrifying thing to be witnessing. And whoever did the effects, wow. Wow. That's all I can say. Like, they captured everything so perfectly. And there were times when the camera was looking at the wounds, and you can see just a pool of blood sitting within the wound. We're not talking about gushing out like a horror film. You could just see a pool. That's the best way I can describe it. It was a pool of blood just floating there in place, like just as if it was just waiting to be tipped over. It was just, man. One of the soldiers whose legs were badly damaged, he was awake, and he was screaming at the top of his lungs. And I mean, I know he was acting, but a part of me wanted to say, you know what? That has to be how painful that is. I mean, imagine just non-stop screaming. And it was so bad at one point, I was like, hey, okay, you got me. You sold it. I believe it hurts. You can stop screaming now. And he just kept going. That's how well acted this film was. There was another gentleman, soldier, who went through the exact same thing as far as his legs, and you thought he was dead. And then he came to. And when he came to, he got to screaming at the top of his lungs. And you knew right then and there how painful that must have been. And this movie is based off of real soldiers' memories. All right, these are all true stories. So and then I think one of the most impactful things about this film is when it concluded. And it was very, very abrupt. It was a very abrupt end. Again, it was no tropes. It was no like, hey, so we're going to neatly tie this movie up in a nice little bow, and everybody's going to go home happy. Don't worry. I know what you saw. We're going to put a smile on your face before you leave the theater. Nah. No tropes. It was very refreshing. In fact, I wish a lot of movies took this approach where, everybody who's anybody in the film is expendable, meaning that they can get hurt. They can, and there's no happy ending. It's just life. Life is real. Real is life. So, yeah. But he comes to and he's screaming at the top of his lung. And you know, both soldiers are asking for morphine at that particular point. It was rough, man. It was a rough thing to watch. And I'm gonna tell you what it really made me do is appreciate soldiers 100 times more. Like being a soldier has nothing to do with like a discounted a golden corral. Like man, that is man. The people when you see people who have demonstrated or has kind of let people know that they've fought in the war, like armed combat, man, I'm going to have such a different outlook when I talk to those kind of men and women, you know, moving forward. It's just like if I identify someone and it looks like they served in like Afghanistan, Iraq, Vietnam, or anything like that, man, I am going to humbly thank them because there was okay, I got to say this before I close this out. There were at least like 3 or 4 guys in this film that were so shocked that they couldn't move. Like, this is how devastating this was. One soldier, and I don't know the names, obviously, but he was literally extremely like, he was like the Arnold Schwarzenegger guy. And when I mean that, I mean, like, he was the protagonist. He had the blonde hair, the blue eyes. You just knew that he was going to run past 100 bullets and jump over a couple dead bodies and cut a couple people with his knife. Man, let me tell you something. Enough stuff happened in this film that he was, like after the IED went off and blew up the tank and blew off the legs of the 2 soldiers and they brought him back in the house, he was literally standing there shook, like, for like 5 minutes. Okay? So that's how real this is. That's how real this movie was. For like 5 minutes, just stuck. There was another guy. He was a little bit more aware, but he was still shook. He had his gun. He was looking over the corner trying to, I guess, secure the door. He like just frozen. There was a guy that was applying pressure to the leg of one of the soldiers. He was frozen like as he's applying pressure. And it accurately, I can't say accurately, I'll say it did a very effective job at communicating how terrifying that was. You think you know, right? You think you know. You think you can imagine what it's like being in war. You think you can imagine. And I was wrong. And this is why anybody who's ever served in the military in any capacity, anybody that is a dependent of anyone who's ever served, anyone who's ever lost somebody in war, and I'm not just talking about in the United States, I'm talking about worldwide, okay? Because everybody's fighting for something, right? And no, I don't think there is a right and wrong in war. I think there's a greedy, you know what I mean? I think that's a thing, but I'm gonna stay in my space. But for anybody who's lost somebody in a war, I don't care what your nationality is, you know, first off, much love to you and thank you for your sacrifice, man. This is tough, man. This is crazy. Like, war is inhumane, man. But I understand why it must happen. Because, again, some people are greedy. They want more than what they need to have. But I would absolutely recommend this movie. But obviously, I don't think it's appropriate for everybody. I think you have to have a strong stomach. You have to go in understanding that you're going to see some very difficult content. And if you can handle that, you're good. All right.